If I were going to write a review of King Size Homer, what should I talk about? I know I want to talk about the difference between it and something like the Computer Wore Men issues, but what about the jokes? I remember the third act of this episode being particularly funny. Oh yeah, here's that part where he goes to the movies and they offer him a garbage bag full of popcorn. And here's the part where... Wait a minute. How did the drinking bird get knocked over? This isn't going to be one of your typical episodes of Simpsons Mysteries because frankly, I don't have a definite solution for you. The case of King Size Homer is a devious one in that they gave us basically no information about how this happened. Homer leaves to go to the movies, leaves the bird at the keyboard. He comes back, it's knocked over. That's all we know. I'm not calling foul on the writers because it ultimately doesn't matter that much to Homer's story. This isn't one of those magic xylophone situations. This, much like most of Simpsons Mysteries, is frivolous and is speculation for the sake of speculation. Because it's the internet, why the hell not? There are a few different explanations for what could have happened. It could have fallen over on its own, it could have been accidentally knocked over by a third party, or more sinisterly, it could have been deliberately sabotaged. I'm going to present each of these scenarios, and it's basically up to you to decide which sounds most plausible. So here we go. We'll start in the most obvious place, that it was a complete accident and the bird fell over on its own. This seems to be the canonical explanation because if it were another character, they would have shown it. The bird is placed in a position where it will repeatedly hit the Y key on the keyboard. You could argue that, if pressed at a certain angle repeatedly, the bird will move very slightly each time, until eventually hitting the corner or some uneven surface and potentially falling over. Makes sense. Against that theory, however, is the initial placement of the bird and where it ended up. Homer left it like this. The base of the keyboard is by the number keys, but when he returns, the bird has flipped around. Now the base is right next to the keyboard with the beak pointing away from the computer. This means when falling over, the base would probably have to either fall forward onto the keyboard and then to its side flipping around, or somehow swing around in some sort of angular tipping motion. I imagine most of the weight would be in the base, so you would think it would tumble off the table or rest against its side on the keyboard. This is, of course, ignoring how the computer desk magically gets a little more real estate to the right. Maybe the whole computer was moved, I don't know. I've hired a panel of 10 to 12 physicists to analyze this problem, and they all say the same thing. It's a cartoon show, please leave me alone. So, in my high school physics estimation, I would say that it's difficult for it to fall over like this, but I guess not impossible. Throw in cartoon physics if you want. If we're going to dismiss the idea of it being a complete accident, then we have to figure out what could have knocked it over. Thankfully, our list of suspects is relatively small. Unless someone broke into the house, it could have only been Marge, Bart, Lisa, Maggie, or possibly Santa's little helper. We'll start with the most simple answer and work our way up. First, Santa's little helper. He has exactly one scene in the episode, when Homer gets annoyed at how much circling he does before sitting on the carpet. Homer forcibly gets him to sit. Now, if you're a crazy and paranoid person, you could argue that this gives Santa's little helper motive, that he would be so annoyed with Homer that he would deliberately mess up his work setup later. Or, less crazy and paranoid, you could say he just knocked it over on its own because he's a dog, and dogs do that. He doesn't exactly have a great record about not destroying things in the house. So the dog, totally possible. That answer is there if you want it. Maggie is a little more difficult. She does feature in the episode when she gives Homer the Play-Doh donut. So you could argue that she approves of the weight loss scheme by Homer. If she can maybe possibly perhaps shoot Mr. Burns, she has the capability of knocking over a bird. The problem with that is that she's with Marge during most of the day. She would have to get away somehow to do it, and Marge says she is out and about doing errands during the day, and might not have been at home at the time anyway. If she did go out, it seems likely that she would take Maggie with her. For this reason, I feel it's somewhat unlikely for Maggie to be the culprit. Sorry Maggie, not this time. Moving right along, we have Marge. A very suspicious character, this Marge. Of everyone in the Simpsons household, she probably has the strongest motive to mess with Homer's little setup. She has made it clear from the get-go how much she disapproves of his disability scheme. She tells him in bed, and later has a sit-down discussion with it. She and Homer get very snippy and passive-aggressive about it. To get back at her lazy husband, she might totally knock over that drinking bird. And what's more, the series has actually given us a character arc about Marge's relationship with him. She got her first taste of it during Marge on the Lam, when Ruth Powers shows her how to use a drinking bird to hit precious antique cans. She honed her skills when she joined the police force in the Springfield Connection, passing the drinking bird exam with flying colors. And let's not forget how the later episode, The Cartridge Family, ended. After Homer gives up his drinking bird for good, Marge finds it too irresistible to let go, and secretly keeps it for herself. This is a character who is very familiar with drinking birds, so the notion of Marge being too squeamish to be the drinking bird knocker over is patently absurd. Anyway, it seems pretty clear that Marge would have motive here. The problem with her is that we're not sure about her opportunity to do it. As mentioned earlier, Marge specifically mentions she does errands during the day, so we don't really know if Marge was actually home at the time. As a refresher, here's how the scene went down. Bart and Lisa enter the house carrying school books, while Homer's preparing to leave. Bart remarks that Marge didn't want Homer being seen in public in his muumuu. Homer says nuts to that, he's leaving anyway, and shows them the drinking bird setup. Homer then goes to the movies, gets heckled, and then gives his inspirational speech about obesity. He immediately goes home and discovers the bird is knocked over. Overall, there doesn't seem to be that much evidence that Marge is actually around in Act 3. The way Bart and Homer talk about her so freely makes it sound like both of them knew she was gone. There's always the possibility that she came home afterwards, messed things up, and then left again. Since she was never shown the drinking bird, she could have simply not known what it was for and removed it. You'd see it and wonder, what's this? And put it aside. So once again, it's open to debate. Personally, I think Bart and Lisa are the most interesting scenarios since they were both right on the spot. Either of them could have easily just gone over and knocked the thing over after Homer leaves. The timeline is kind of weird in general right here because they're shown entering the house like it's after school, but then later Lisa is magically riding the school bus again. Doesn't really matter for our purposes that much, especially since the joke is so funny, but kind of a confusing issue in the timeline of this episode. The main point is that Bart and Lisa were in the house after Homer left. They were both specifically shown Homer's setup. Even if both of them turned around to go to school again for some reason, either of them could have easily knocked over the bird before leaving. They both had the exact same opportunity. For Bart and Lisa, the difference is in motive. Would either of them want to mess with their dad's work setup? For Lisa, it is crystal clear she does not approve of what Homer is doing. She is the very first person who tells him how stupid and dangerous his plan is. And it's Lisa who is, once again, characterizing the situation as creepy, which convinces Marge to have a sit down with him. She is so tired of her home situation that she says she would rather live at school if she could. Maybe that's why she's taking an afternoon school bus ride. It seems overall from a story perspective, the Lisa narrative would make the most sense. She warns her dad, he doesn't listen. She tries to have Marge talk to him, he still doesn't listen. Now he's not even going to work anymore. Yeah, I could totally see Lisa walking over there annoyedly and removing the drinking bird. Let him explain that to his boss. The only objection I would have to this theory is Lisa's intelligence and social consciousness. She knows her dad is a safety technician for a nuclear plant. Therefore, I feel Lisa is more likely to realize that, no, getting back at Homer might cause a meltdown. Even if she wants to do it, she might find it too dangerous. Lisa is the kind of character who thinks things through. Bart, on the other hand, isn't. He is an agent of chaos who basically pranks people for no reason sometimes. He could have totally walked over there and knocked it over just to screw with his dad. Bart wouldn't have thought of the logistics or danger of that situation, he would just do it because he felt like it. His specific motivation for doing so, aside from general chaos theory, is a little harder to pin down. Throughout the whole episode, Bart is on Team Homer, aiding him every step of the way. Bart even dreams about a day where he can sit at home with a rag on a stick. Of everyone in the house, Bart would be the most approving of Homer's scheme to get out of work, underachiever and proud of it. At the same time, I think there is an argument to be made that Bart gets progressively more and more tired of Homer's scheme. Bart's friends are clearly not that impressed by Homer's lifestyle, and they all actively make fun of it. Being known as the kid with the hyper-obese father might be embarrassing. This is, by the way, literally the scene right before the drinking bird. We have the kids watching through the window, and then the next scene is Bart and Lisa entering the house. And then Homer tells him that he's now leaving the house to be seen in public. You could argue that Bart is suddenly realizing there was a downside to his plan that he wasn't considering. People wouldn't think this kind of lifestyle is cool. It would be mocked repeatedly and make Bart seem less cool by extension. So how do you keep Homer from roaming around Springfield in a muumuu? Make sure he doesn't leave the house anymore. I don't want to overstate Bart's negativity toward Homer because a Bart solution isn't really dependent on it. As discussed earlier, Bart isn't really a calculating character. He's kinda temperamental. He could have totally had mild annoyances about the situation, and then just mess with Homer because it's funny. Everyone else thinks it's funny, may as well let Bart join in too. And that basically closes out our list of suspects and explanations for what could have happened. Once again, we're not going to come up with an answer that is 100% satisfactory or will prove anything in this example. They simply didn't tell us how it happened. I can't sit here and play some upbeat guitar music and use evidence to conclude what really happened. It's really up to you, the audience, to interpret what you think is most likely. I personally lean toward the Bart theory, given his history of pranks and the fact that he was on the scene. If you want to view his part of the story as creating some kind of motive for him, that's just icing on the cake. If you want to stick with motive alone, maybe you should just go with the Marge or Lisa theory. Or maybe it was a complete accident and cartoon physics took over. Or maybe a wizard did it. So here's where you come in. What theory do you think makes the most sense? Is there an idea I didn't consider? Maybe the real mystery is what's up with the theater manager's green hair. Let me know in the comments. No matter what explanation you come up with, there's no denying that King Size Homer is an absolute gem of an episode and is well worth watching even today. Just don't try this at home. Your cholesterol levels will thank you.